Fantastic. Thank you so much for accepting to be interviewed. I'm delighted to be here. So we're here at MIT. And you are a researcher here at MIT. So can we just start with maybe you presenting yourself?
Sure. My name is Stephanie Werner, and I'm a research scientist at the MIT Center for Information Systems Research. We're a research center located in the Sloan School of Management, and we study how to help businesses succeed in the digital economy.
And I think it's so exciting. I work with that with a lot of companies and also with advisory, and I follow you. And I was totally blown away with your very interesting book.
Oh, thank you.
That you have just come out with. So I thought if I can ask a couple of questions around that.
Wonderful, yes.
I'm going to take some quotes that you have in your book. One of them is, digital transformation is not about technology, it's about change. And it is not a matter of if, but a question of when and how. Can you share a bit how you came to that conclusion?
Well, when we started looking at all of the companies that were undergoing a transformation, and when we started looking in depth at the companies who had talked to us about their most important IT-enabled IT project for business transformation, we saw that they were using technology, but it wasn't about saying, oh, we're going to do social media. It was instead about how are we going to get to know the customer better, or how are we going to become more networked. They were really about trying to accomplish these business objectives, not really about becoming great at technology. Becoming great at technology was helping them get to that business objective.
Right.
And the matter of not if but when, pretty much every company we've talked to is understanding that the digital era has really affected how customers want to interact with your company, and it means you can't not do something.
Right.
They're used to this seamless, easy way of ordering online, and then packages show up, or even when you're in the B2B, being able to track your shipments so that you can go and plan better inventory. So it may not be a real customer-centric, something that's really flashy, but you are going to have to digitally transform.
There's also some really good things in your book, and you're referring to that leaders lack a common language or a framework to help them assess the degree of threat to their business, and more importantly, to offer direction about where they should go. Can you share a bit more about that?
Yes.
Really interesting.
We got this idea about the framework, and in fact that led to the 6 questions. When we were talking to senior executives, and they're going, well, we know we have to change, but how are we going to change, and what does it mean to change? And we've been getting better at operating efficiency, but that doesn't seem to be what actually we need to do. So what is the language? And we found that by giving executives these 6 questions and going into depth about each of these questions, it started to give them a framework of figuring out where you needed to go and then how you were going to get there. And in subsequent research to the book, we've continued along this line.
Okay, very interesting. So there are 6 questions. So I actually thought I would ask around the questions, if
Sure.
it's okay. So your first question is, what is the digital threat or opportunity? And what challenge do you see that leaders have in actually even embracing digital?
Well, often they don't know, they haven't been able to pin down what is the threat. They have this overall kind of diffuse feeling that there is something there, and they know that they've got to deal with it. So we came up with a question to ask, which was, how much of your revenues, what percentage of your revenues are under threat in the next 5 years? Now, perhaps we could have looked at the opportunity, but it seemed harder to get leaders to talk about the opportunities, whereas we could get them to pin down what the threat was. And on the average company, it was 28%, and large companies with over $7 billion in revenue, it's 46%. So think about what that means. that means that you have to come up with innovations, with new business models to replace, in the case of large companies, almost 50% of your revenues just to stay flat, no growth. And so that gets people thinking. Once they've put a number to it, then they can say, oh, what are we going to do?
Yes.
And that leads to the next question.
Which is fantastic. And so the next question is around which digital business model is best for your future. So can you describe maybe the business models there are, and how should they choose?
Oh, choosing is hard, but I can describe.
Yeah.
So when we started the research and asked executives about these business transformation projects, we collected, I think finally in the end, 144 of them. And then you sit down and do research, and you kind of separate them and look at them and try to find commonalities, and came up with two key dimensions. And one was, how well do you know your customer and the problems that they are trying to solve? Mm-hmm. And then, how networked are you? What's your business design? Mm-hmm. Are you more of a value chain, or are you more of a ecosystem, or kind of a web of relationships? And so that gives you, in fine academic fashion, for a 2x2 with 4 models. And the 4 models are supplier, which is a model where you don't know a lot about your end customer, and you're still operating in a value chain. So we see a lot of companies that sell through other companies as being suppliers. So for instance, a manufacturer of televisions sells through a retailer, and that would be a supplier. Procter & Gamble, in many respects, is a pretty classic supplier, because they're not typically selling direct to the employee. What they have to worry about there is, do they lose power? They have to worry about efficiency, and then also, how are they going to innovate? So we see a lot of companies in the supplier model starting to really try to get to know the customer better, starting to think about making some partnerships. The second model is what we call an omni-channel, and that is the company is still working in a value chain, but really owns the customer relationship. And they've done a lot of work trying to figure out what are the problems, not just what are they going to sell, but what are the problems that customers are trying to solve. And they've had to work to integrate many of their silos so that they can start to create solutions that are going to go across silos for those customers. And so we see many banks and retail companies moving up into this. Mobile is very important, and other kinds of technologies that are going to allow this seamless movement across channels.
Oh, right.
The third business model is one we call modular producer, and that is one where we thought that we were going to see lots of born digital companies there. And in fact, we do see a lot of born digital companies in this space, but we're doing research on that this year on what is a modular producer. It turns out that there are actually lots of companies who are providing a digital service that are kind of in the background. You don't know very much about them. So for instance, one of the companies that we interviewed actually does they run reward programs for companies like hotels.
Okay.
And so it's kind of a white label business. And there are different ways of getting paid. So a lot of times for a supplier, it's you buy something and it's a one time. You move into the modular producer and you're starting to look at things like payment by APA load or subscription type of payments. They're a really very different business model. So we see payment companies are often, so peer-to-peer payment companies, a company like PayPal is very much like a modular producer. You have to be able to plug and play in each quadrant, and you have to be technology agnostic and secure. And it's a tough model to be in. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. And then the fourth business model is what we call an ecosystem driver. And that's a company that owns the platform. They own the customer relationship. They bring in complementary services. They've got great customer data. They have got to have a great customer experience. And because they own the platform, they actually get a small piece of every transaction. It's really, really hard to be an ecosystem driver. I think that Amazon, Alibaba, WeChat are really kind of quintessential ecosystem drivers.
Really exciting.